Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaber.io, and I'm here today with Peter Samaan, Infrastructure Engineering Manager with Remitly. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're almost ready for the 3-day weekend here, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I would just wish we could get out and do something.
Yeah, that would have been really nice, right?
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I golf. So I am actually going to golf this weekend.
That's very nice. I don't really have much plans for the long weekend this time. But like we might barbecue. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
Depending on the weather. Yeah.
Yes, I know. So can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Peter Samaan. I'm, as you said, the infrastructure engineering manager at Remitly. I've been at Remitly for about 2 years. I've been managing infrastructure teams or DevOps teams for a little more than 4 years now, in organizations running DevOps as well as like a formal SRE or production technical operations teams. I've been in the US for about 7 years. Before that, I've worked for many companies around the world, including HP and Nestle. I've worked in Europe. I've worked in Africa, in Southeast Asia. So I've had a bit of a run around the world. It's been fun.
Wow, you almost sound like you're in the military with all that international experience.
Yeah, it was more software always. But yeah, who knew that software could give you a trip around the world like that?
I know. So what has been your experience with remote employment now that you've been everywhere?
So depending on the kind of company, at first I've worked as an on-site engineer, which to me always made me think of like I have a software development back office, but to them I was the remote person, right? So for most of my career, that was actually the setup. I'm somewhere facing the customer or at a customer site or something. I'm doing work on the ground and I'm on my own. And my team is somewhere else supporting via email, software development and testing, phones, that sort of thing. That was just what the job was. There was no non-remote version of that kind of job. Since I started managing teams, I'm kind of on the other end of it. There's always remote team members and remote peers. I've worked in 3 companies in the US so far, and they've all had remote components. Sometimes it's other people working in a remote office, but it's a full office. Sometimes it's people working from home offices. Right now, we're all remote from our homes, and it's giving a new flavor to all of our conversations about supporting remote work in general.
Yes, well, and as you know, there's a difference between being a remote employee and working from home.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very common for people to be in remote offices, which is, you still feel like you're part of something, and now that's totally changed.
Absolutely. And I think in previous jobs, remote offices aren't all the same, right? Some of them are really small. It's 2 or 3, maybe 5 people. Some of them are much bigger, like software development centers, developing software for a remote client. And it affects relationships between these offices, the size of the office and what it does exactly. So I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, but for some setups, I felt that if a team was small enough, it was almost as if they were working from home or working individually in the sense that you wanted the same considerations to apply to some degree. Yes,
this is true. So what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
So I had a manager once tell me that the future of employment in general is remote. He was talking about software, that all future software employment is going to be remote. I was skeptical, honestly, but right now I think for certain sectors that's much more likely. It's always been attractive for employers to consider remote employment if they're able to, and I think we'll touch on what being able to means. But there's a larger talent pool and there's more cost flexibility, right? So if you could make use of it, you probably want to as an employer. And for employees, if you have roots in certain places, you don't want to uproot and you want to stay there, but you want to further develop your career and get better opportunities. Remote work is a great opportunity to do that. It's all good, but I think there's always been some friction built in. there's a lack of visibility, and sometimes you could get lower quality of communications. And I think it eats away at trust and team cohesion when not done right. So I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few years because I've been working with remote teams a lot. And I've come to realize that it's all about trust at the end of the day. Like, you just want to build a very strong trust. And there's many different ways to do that. So some teams, so this is what I was talking about with like really smaller teams. It's a really smaller team and you can't put a lot of process or tooling around this. You want them to be as autonomous as possible, right? So you're almost treating them like an outside contractor, even when they are full-time employees. And you want them to be responsible for results or be accountable for results. And that is it. So you give them a goal, and you tell them to go for it. And there's very little codependence between you or your main office, if you have a main office, and those remote employees. This works really well for some people. It doesn't scale very well. So when you try to scale up this remote operation more and have a larger portion of your workforce be remote, that doesn't really work very much. Now you need to replicate certain things that you're doing on site to the remote setting. So if you are instead trying to make remote work an integral part of your operations as a business, then you need to have processes that include some tooling and a culture that includes social rituals and conventions that address this friction, this built-in friction, and promote trust. I've seen it work in some places really well by like on-site work that then turns into remote, or like so you build a social capital, if you will, a strong relationship between members of the team, and then some members of that team become remote. And maybe that's just part of this job description of like, there will be times where you're working co-located and then other times where you're remote. And we'll use the time when we're co-located to build trust. And then use from that reserve of trust while you are remote, in that we allow you greater autonomy. We expect you to keep us updated on everything you're doing. And then we index highly on outputs rather than inputs. And that works well. And I've seen it work well. And then the other way I've seen it work is companies that go fully remote, and it becomes a forcing function. I know of a few companies that do that now, and I know of a few companies that are considering doing that now, or at least expanding it to some degree. If everybody is remote for a certain team, it sets a different expectation. It's now something that isn't that remote person's problem to solve. It's all of our problem to solve. And now we need shared solutions rather than individual solutions. And I think that can be very powerful, because when companies dedicate time and effort to making remote work, it's a reusable skill, and it's a muscle you build, and then it just opens up a lot of potential. Versus like what I've seen some companies, which is just kind of dabble in remote work a little bit, like the exception, the off chance that like there's a really good candidate that you want to hire, and that candidate is remote, so you're just going to make allowances for them. I think it works a lot better when it's planned and when it's more genericized, when it can apply to anybody. Right now, I've seen, like in our company at least, we're starting to think more about how to make remote work a success, because of the fact that we don't quite know if all of our offices are going to open at the same time, or what the communication patterns are going to look like 6 months from now. We can make guesses, but we're not entirely sure, so we're trying to be prepared. In a way, feels almost like you're like strapping a jetpack on, and it's like even failure can be accelerated in that case. So that's kind of my thoughts around it at the moment. I think it can be made better and more effective when specific resources, like dedicated resources, are pointed at it. Don't just expect it to happen on its own. So that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, I don't know if you noticed, Twitter announced last week that they're going 100% remote.
I've seen that.
From now on. So that'll be really interesting to see how that works out.
It will be.
And especially, like, you know, they communicate, I'm assuming, in 280 bytes at a time. Interesting to see how that works out.
a memo in a 20 tweet thread. Yeah, that would be awesome.
so, what is the story behind Remitly? What do you do? Who are your customers? Things like that.
Yeah, so Remitly is an international remittances business. So we transfer money globally around the world. Our customers are immigrants around the world. So Australia, the US, Canada, Europe, who want to send money back home, and they don't want to pay a lot of fees, and they want a quick service. As in, if I want to send money, I want to know when it's going to arrive. I want to be sure when it's going to arrive, and then I want it to arrive on that time. So Remitly makes a promise. We say, if you send the money right now, this is when you will receive it. Usually it's in like 3 or 4 days. We give you a specific date. And if we miss that date, we make it right. So we take that promise very seriously. We also have, in most countries, no fees for that product, for sending money in 4 days or so. And we collect some fees for immediate transfer. So that's an option as well. We could go for an express transfer and like just click send, the recipient gets the money immediately. And we collect a small fee for that. So we've been in business for more than 10 years, I believe. It's still technically a startup, and it's really exciting to work there.
Interesting. And how did you incorporate the idea of remote at your company? Was it? I mean, I'm assuming it was done at a different level than you, right?
Yes. So Remitly's software development runs on autonomous teams. So teams have always had the ability to make decisions themselves. As in, if a team wanted to hire a remote employee, they could just go ahead and do it. And if a team wanted to expand in another office remotely, they could do it as well, provided that it's like it's not a lot of maintenance, obviously. For bigger expansions, there has to be coordination with facilities and so on. So Remitly is distributed across the world. So the headquarters is in Seattle, but we have offices in Manila, in the Philippines. We have offices in Krakow, in Poland. This is for software development. And then we have business operations offices in many other places, including Managua in Nicaragua, and including I think Mumbai, actually, in India. There's quite a few new ones opening too right now. So we're now hiring developers in different centers in Africa as well. And it's been a real journey to integrate all of those places in a way that makes sense. And I think for some things we've done really well. For others, there's still some challenges that we're working through.
Well, you'd have challenges even if everybody was in Seattle.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yes.
Sure, you just have other or different types of challenges, right?
Yes, that is absolutely right.
So the ongoing pandemic really caused everybody to go remote in mid-March, some earlier, some a little bit later. Did that cause any major roadblocks or challenges that you didn't expect?
I don't think it caused any challenges or roadblocks, to be honest. It was more of a forcing function. It made us get much more intentional about things like communications and about things like what our processes are. So previously, as I mentioned, it used to be kind of the problem of the remote party, to figure out what's going on in headquarters, to communicate clearly back what's going on where they are. And it was, a lot of communication was ad hoc as well. So you just expect people to mention it and other people to get that mention or get that memo. Right. And if you missed the memo, then you missed it. And I think we've become a lot more intentional about communication under the pandemic. I think attendance of team meetings has gone up. People now are subscribing more to updates from all around the world because they want to know what everybody else is doing, because otherwise they're not going to know. There's not as much of a grapevine, I guess, anymore. So communication needs to leave informal channels and go into more formal channels. And I think that's been really good for us, to be honest. It's something that we as a company have always said we want to do more of, get more formal about how we communicate and how we manage work as well. So things like grooming our backlogs, or specifying what a certain project is going to entail, or like doing better change management, things like that. We've always wanted to be more formal about it, but it's like everything, it takes effort and you want to do things faster. So sometimes we have kind of done half the effort on some of the more formal practices. Now we can't quite afford to, because there's, like I said, there's this forcing function. There's this reduced communication, and now everything has to be a little more formalized. And I think that's good, because I don't think it slowed us down. It did add more effort, though. Like, there was a bigger overhead now to everything we're doing. But I think it's improved performance across the board. So, for example, I manage a team that's distributed between 2 locations already. And it's easy for me to think of part of my team as remote and part of it as not. But now I have to think of the whole team as remote and kind of gear everything I do to a remote setting. I think that's not only improved the team cohesion, but just performance across the board. There are parts of the company that I think have bigger challenges than my team. I run a software development team. At the end of the day, it's kind of easy to do this remote. Certain functions like customer service, there's more tooling and there's more process that needs to go into that. So that's a little longer of a journey for us. So we're working on it for sure, but it's a bigger challenge, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I've managed remote development teams too, and developers are a little bit of a unique breed. They actually prefer to be, I'm not going to say alone, but tell me what you want, tell me when you want it, and I'll get it for you.
And I'll get it done. Yes.
So they're naturally geared towards that type of environment. But you're right. I think the thing I've seen is, you're right, a lot of companies have had to button down their processes and their communication. And it's actually a good thing. And hopefully they won't go back to the old ways when everything goes back to normal. Because it has caused a lot of companies to really, I'm not going to say toe the line, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, it's like strapping a jetpack on. You're going to get where you were going, but faster. And there are still things for us, even like as software developers, that are a bit of a challenge. So coordinating cross-team projects, for example. That's always been a little bit of a challenge because we run autonomous teams, but it was a lot easier than right now. Like, I think we kind of winged it when we were all co-located. But right now, there needs to be like specific time dedicated to like the project management aspect of a cross-team project or product development feature or something. Now we need to figure out how we're going to communicate with all of these other people outside of our team, because there are these codependencies. And like you said, sometimes developers just want to be like, just tell me what you need me to do and I'll just go do it and come back to you. But sometimes there are projects that require much more synchronous types of communication. So I think with these, we need to come up with better processes as well.
Well, this especially comes true when you get into integration testing and things like that. You really need to button down those processes. Right.
And we rely on automation a little more for that too, right? It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything. You'll still need a human component to a lot of the things that we do, even when it comes to testing. But having a basic suite of integration tests and unit tests, at least with a minimum coverage, it saves a lot of time with things like that. I think, again, like you could use co-location as a crutch sometimes, where it's like, just come with me for like 30 minutes. We'll take a look at my code. We'll run a few scenarios. We'll be fine. And now you need more of a, like I said, a formal approach, including test coverage, like guaranteed test coverage, and encode it into the tooling you're using, so that, again, you're trying to increase trust. So whatever you could put in place to increase trust in the product you're building and in the communications you're having with your rest of your teammates, then that's going to save you effort that you're going to have to do personally to connect.
Yeah, I agree. So there are companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products, which are, especially for startups. How important do you think that'll be going forward? You're already familiar with it, having teams in remote areas. How important do you think that'll be going forward for the general population?
I think it's a very interesting idea. As I said, it's attractive to be able to hire anywhere, especially when you're cost conscious, and most startups are. But the need for processes and tooling and training and these social rituals and conventions, it's very nice to have that be your business, right? So when you're facilitating for companies to adopt remote work, you could just package these things and offer them as tried and true and tested. We know that these things work. We've seen them work elsewhere. Here's what you need to do to expand your remote work footprint. I know that we at Remitly have used some agencies previously that would help us hire people in remote locations, but not just the hiring part, but also the ongoing work. Because, like I said, it's a lot to reinvent every time as a team, how you're going to work remote. And most teams just want to focus on building the applications that they're building and delivering business value, rather than figuring out how are we going to work remote. So if somebody comes in and says, here's how you're going to do it, here's how I'm going to make that easy for you, and here's all of those candidates, I see that's a very, it makes a lot of the pain easier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. You take care of someone's pain, they'll be a customer for life, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not for life, but definitely for now.
Yeah, I guess for long enough, right?
Right. That's what you do for your customers. They need to get money somewhere fast. You take care of that for them, and they're happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, well, Peter, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been very informative, and have a great day. Have a great weekend, a long weekend.
You too. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Thanks. Bye.